So 3 old university buddies get together about once a year at their old stomping grounds to have a few beers and reminisce and catch up on since the last time they met. One of them is an engineer, another one is an economist, and the third is a psychologist. So one year they get together, and the engineer is very excited to share with his friends the fact that the electric car that he and his team had been working on is ready for market. The economist is very excited. He pulls out a cocktail napkin to do some calculations based on the suggested price of this electric car, the price of a comparable fuel-driven car, and other factors like the current and projected price of gasoline and electricity. And he declares, you've got a real winner here. I mean, somebody who buys your car is going to come out ahead, economically speaking, in the long run. And so the psychologist proposes a toast, congratulations, and I guess next year you're going to be picking up the tab to the engineer. So a year goes by, they get together again, and the engineer is sad to share with his friends the fact that sales of the electric car have been dismal. The economist says, that's impossible. I mean, this was a great deal for consumers. I don't know what's going on here. And so the engineer and the economist are scratching their heads. They turn to their psychologist friend, and they say, you have any ideas? And the psychologist says, as a matter of fact, I think I do have some ideas. I'm a psychologist, and I'm going to share with you today what the psychologist might have shared with his friends in this hypothetical scenario. Now, I just want a point of clarification. I'm well aware that Charles Darwin was not a psychologist. He certainly didn't label himself as such. But he, in many sense, were well aware that the natural selection not only guides the way we look, it also guides the way we behave. And it's through an evolutionary lens that I think we have the best shot at understanding behavior that doesn't otherwise make sense to us, such as why don't people adopt green technology even though it's in their financial interest to do so. Okay. Now, so I hope I've convinced you that behavioral science is a necessary part of the equation when we're trying to figure out why people don't behave as green as they should, or as they could. But nevertheless, it's behavioral science. It's not rocket science after all. So you may be saying to yourself, it's common sense. You don't need a scientist to tell you about behavior. I behave, you behave. Certainly we can put our heads together and figure out what's going on here. Now your intuitive model of behavior might look something like this. There are 2 things that predispose us to behave in a particular way. One are our attitudes, and the other one is our knowledge. So in the environmental case, if you have somebody who has a pro-environmental attitude, in other words, they express a genuine concern for the environment, and they also have knowledge that a lot of human behaviors are damaging to the environment, then their behavior will follow in a consistent way. So, insofar as we can all agree that human activity is problematic for the planet right now, it must be due to the fact that there are people out there who have anti-environmental attitudes and or ignorance about the role of humans in environmental destruction. Right? And so the solution, according to this intuitive model, is simple. All we have to do is find those people with bad attitudes and ignorance, and we have to change their attitudes, and we have to educate them. Right? Now, I'm not saying those 2 things are important. I'm not saying it's not true that there are people out there with bad attitudes and ignorance, and we have to change their attitudes and educate them, but I don't think that's the whole story, not by a long shot. And here's why. If you look at survey research, for example, what you find is, at least in Western societies, that pro-environmental attitudes are all around. I mean, most of us just express a genuine concern for the environment. Moreover, although there are gaps in our knowledge, most people have an appreciation for the fact that there's things that we do on a day-to-day basis that are not good for the planet. We know. We have the knowledge. Moreover, if you look around you, you'll find people who have pro-environmental attitudes and all the knowledge they need to have, and their behavior does not follow from that. Their behavior is not consistent. Guilty is charged. And I'm guessing that if you were honest with yourself, many of you would acknowledge that about yourself as well. So to me, the intuitive model doesn't explain everything. What I'd like to try to convince you of is that behavioral science research has found that even when you have the requisite attitudes and knowledge, there are barriers that prevent those things from translating into behavior. So what I call these barriers the 4 S's. Okay? The first of which is short-sightedness. What I mean by that is that we have a tendency to prioritize the present and the immediate future over the distant future. So if you go back to the hypothetical electric car example that I expressed earlier, you have the upfront cost of the fact that the electric car is more expensive than a comparable fuel-driven car. And that's going to loom large in your mind, and it's going to overshadow the fact that over the life of the car, you're going to save yourself money by having bought an electric one. And when you look at other problems, such as climate change, for example, it's very, very easy to see our short-sightedness. It's, you're telling people the things you're doing now are going to have consequences down the road. It's really, really hard for us to appreciate those things. Slothfulness refers to the fact that we are lazy, that we will always take the shortest distance between 2 points. We will always choose the least effortful option when doing things. And so, so self-interested. What we mean by that is self-explanatory. It just means that, and I hate to sound cynical, but if you're expecting people to change, to promote environmental change, you have to express to people what's in it for them. Lastly, we're social creatures, which means that I know what you're doing, you know what I'm doing, and I know that you know what I'm doing. Okay? And so if you ask me, for example, to do something, to make a sacrifice, to an environmental change sacrifice to benefit humanity, and I look around and none of the rest of you are doing it, what's going to motivate me to do the same thing? Right? On the positive side, though, if I do look around me and I see other people have made that sacrifice, it's going to inspire me to follow suit. What I'm going to do is talk to you about 3 environmental success stories. And all of these success stories owe their success, I will argue, to the fact that they overcame these barriers that were in place. The first of which you're all familiar with. Many of us now use reusable cloth bags when we go grocery shopping. Just a few years ago, not too long at all, we were using plastic bags given to us at checkout. This is an example of slothfulness, slothfulness being overcome by our social nature. It was slothful because it was easy for us to just do what we had always done, to go into the store, not worrying about bringing bags with us, and just get the bags at checkout. Right? To use cloth bags was effortful. We had to develop a new habit, develop a new routine, and it was a difficult thing to do. I can't tell you how many times when I was making that transition myself where I forgot my bags in my car or at home. Right? But I was motivated to make that change, to make that effort, because I'm a social creature. If I publicly identify myself as somebody who's concerned about the environment, and I go to a very public place like a grocery store where I see my neighbors, I see my coworkers, they all know that I'm concerned about the environment. And if I have now a public opportunity to do the right thing or the wrong thing, use cloth or plastic, I'm going to be motivated because of that social pressure to do the right thing. And it was that motivation that allowed me to make a routine out of grabbing my bags when I went into the store. Solar. Solar is very much like our hypothetical electric car example insofar as there's a large upfront cost and the reward is a delayed one into the future. So short-sightedness gets in the way of us adopting solar technology. But one reason to be hopeful is patterns in the geographical distribution of where people are adopting solar. What research has found is that you find some communities where a lot of people have adopted solar and other communities where very few people have adopted solar. Right? To explain this, goes something like this. Imagine that I, again, am a person who publicly identifies as being concerned about the environment. And let's say I have a neighbor, we'll call her Susan, who is the same way. And Susan decides to go solar, right? Get solar on her house. Now, her behavior can influence me in 2 ways. One, let's just say that I respect Susan as an intelligent person and somebody who is fiscally responsible. I know that she wouldn't have made that decision unless she had put a lot of thought into it. She did the math. She decided it was a wise investment for her. Okay? So the fact that she was able to overcome her short-sightedness is going to inspire me to do the same. Moreover, if she and I both publicly identify as environmentally concerned citizens, she has now one-upped me, right? She is now greener than I am, and if I'm going to continue to argue that I'm a green person and concerned, I now have to keep up with her. It's like keeping up with the Joneses, but in a good way. I'm going to split this for good, and that's what they think is going on in these communities where a lot of people have adopted solar. Is that there were some early adopters who got the technology, and that idea spread through that community. So imagine exploiting this social phenomenon in this way. Let's take these communities that don't currently have a lot of solar and seed them with early adopters by helping people who are considering early adoption helping them overcome their short-sightedness by offering an incentive like a rebate. So taking some of that short-term bite out of the investment to allow them to overcome their short-sightedness, then they adopt, and then their neighbors follow suit because of social contagiousness. The last example is related to our energy usage. And this is something where short-sightedness is a big problem. When it comes to our energy use, it's really, really hard to see the forest for the trees. Because the little bit of energy you're using on a moment-to-moment basis, it's hard to see how that adds up to a lot of energy in the long term. Moreover, you're just an individual in a planet of billions of people, and it's hard to see how the proportionally little bit of energy you use is contributing to a global problem. One way we think we can get around this problem of short-sightedness is to give people more direct feedback about their energy use. The way we used to get feedback, the old method of giving feedback, was to give people a monthly bill. And that was based on, say, an annual meter reading of their electricity usage, and you split that into 12ths, and then you give people a bill for 1/12 of the amount. That's delayed feedback. It's hard to see from that feedback how the way you use energy is having a long-term effect. If we, however, take advantage of the fact that people are constantly connected to the internet, and moreover are used to getting regular updates from their Facebook friends and the people they follow on Twitter, why don't we give people similar regular day-to-day updates about how they've been using energy on a day-to-day basis? Programs that have done that using things like smartphone apps have been very, very successful at reducing energy usage of people participating in the program. Another aspect of these successful programs has exploited our social nature. They provide social comparison information in one's billing about how you're doing compared to other people who have similar households to you. Right? So if you see, for example, that you have a four-person family in a house with 3 bedrooms or whatever, you see from other people in your community how well they're doing, and if you see you're using more energy than they are, then you'll be inspired to follow suit for social reasons. And that's exactly what happens. People who participate in these programs with social comparison information tend to reduce their energy usage. Kermit the Frog famously lamented that it's not easy being green. I hope I've convinced you today that although we are not naturally green, we are capable of being green, and the way to get there, where we need to go, is to understand what is getting in the way of people being green. And hopefully the most obvious way is for people who are concerned about the environment to be early adopters, to be the change, to do that, and hopefully others will be inspired by you and they will follow suit. Thanks for listening.